From the 7th of the first month of 1436, Alphabet Game and the ECK Dream 1 Discourses, Lesson 8. The ECK Dream 1 Discourses by Harold Klemp has an illustration of what may be Harold Klemp on page 170. The position of this white figure upon a bed is reminiscent of the hanged man of the tarot. This is entirely appropriate, for the quote pertains to the water card, which is trump number 12, God realization, bhakti, our devotional service, the law of love, and the zoas, the 4 laws of the 5th initiation. Laying with your hands behind one's head may alleviate pain and stiffness of the arms and sides. Laying with his left leg bent and his foot pressed flat may do likewise for the leg, hip, or back. The beam entering the face is the light and or sound that comes into one's consciousness with the spiritual exercises of ECK. The question is, the waning moon among the starry scene with the bed turning into clouds really about to decline in what one reflects as one becomes more of an eckist? Are the frosty windows a symbol of the cold reality of that view? Our religion is the light at the upper left-hand corner coming from the same source as the beam. Does that mean you are getting some of the knowledge of manifestation that is available to you, but missing most of what you could have as a result of Eckankar being the base of one's choices? Lesson 8. How we learn in the dream state. Humans and other creatures try to understand their environment. As time went on, people had an understanding of a larger world. People started to disagree about the beliefs they formed without knowledge. The ECK Dream 1 Discourses by Harold Klemp includes a fallacy on page 171. It wasn't that science appeared. It was just that the amount of knowledge people had to support or formulate mythologies and ideologies has grown. Progress has slowed, but it forced a lot of the mere opinions out of existence or into the background, at the least. Science is progressing very quickly nowadays. Society may not always advance, though. We may fall backwards, like the occasional churchman who deemed the world flat, or some other such thing. Eckankar denies the historical findings about the Catholic Church not allowing their mythology to keep in line with geography. History has shown that it has always been the case that most Catholics believed the world was a globe. It is important to determine the difference between what logic decides and what is actually knowledge. Deductive reasoning and such may have a tendency to go astray, but do Eckists really do this with their so-called spiritual experiences? The very phrase means they are what is called a metaphysical religion. Things are not otherworldly merely because they are thought of as such. The 172nd page claims the conclusions an Eckist reach are wholly their own. Can that ever be the case? If they really take the spiritual head of Eckankar, currently Harold Klemp, as their dream master and think he gives them experience that fits their needs, then it takes a degree of the sense of personal decision and accountability away from the dreaming process. Faith is a conviction based on partial knowledge. Eckankar tries to deny that it is a faith group at times, but Christian churches are not the only ones ignoring advances and bending truth to fit their misunderstanding of Scripture. When I do that, it's my way of saying I'm bringing up direct quotes, like earlier, the spiritual exercises of ECK. Eckankar relies more on the experiences of its followers, are mere members, than it being a path of alleged orthodoxy and orthopraxy. It does heavily rely on the ECK books and discourses by whoever the current Mahanta, the living Eckmaster, is, for that most members ever reach the state where they convince themselves that Harold Klemp and the rest of the alleged Eckmasters taught them more in dreams and other states of consciousness than the books present. Eckankar refers to dream travel as an initial stage, even before its first initiation upon its chelas are members. Dream initiations are virtually indistinguishable from other types of dreams, and people are trained to believe they had the first, sometimes during their first year of membership, after the age of 18 solar years old. Is enlightenment really confined to stages of one-time experiences known as initiations? Now, when I was 18, I didn't know Eckankar existed, but something did happen where I knew I'm not this body, I'm not this mind. This spirit soul, this jiva, this living being, that's me. The rest is vehicles. So sometimes things do wait till you're 18. Is enlightenment really confined to stages of one-time experiences known as ECK initiations? Many will even go years in the organization with no change in the dream life they recall. At unlocking the puzzle box, the golden heart, or some other such workshop, a man asked why the spiritual exercises still had given him none of even the most simple, distinct experience with light or sound in the years he spent as a member. I think it was 5 years. Harold Klemp may have answered, but he was sort of dumbstruck. Never again did he answer questions live at seminars again. Chelas are supposed to have humility and dignity. It's page 173 in the Shariat Ki Sugmad, Way the Master, a Eckankar Bible. Book 1. Wrong about otherwise not being possible for its members. I brought out this Shariat Ki Sugmad, Book 1 and 2. We have Don't one of the Vardankar ones give a third, or well, perhaps maybe an earlier group, but there's supposed to be 12, you know. Both official Eckankar writings and other sources seem to make it sound like people are repelled more by the fact that people should be able to display it. That are repelled more by the fact that people believe in Eckankar rather than be attracted to it, by it. Wait. Okay, I'll think of for a second what I was trying to say. Whatever one's path, people should be able to display it with or without mentioning it to others. They do want people to be attracted and believe, but it's, you know, believing in it seems to be the more important thing, as far as what they say. It's difficult sometimes to tell the difference between member-only material and the other stuff. There's not really the distinction as far as what I've heard and what I know firsthand. Eckankar borrows the idea that people are sons and daughters of God from other faith. Isn't it enough for males and females to have the physical parents they do? Isn't claiming to be a child of God a pretending that arising out of certain psychological deficiencies? Eckists are taught to have faith that brings about humility and causes the love of God as a noun or sugmod on page 173 and 174 of the Ecktring 1 Discourses. Wouldn't it be a deflecting to turn to an intercessor, like an alleged dream master, to help with learning when one can use the same effort to turn to God? The second year of Eckankar Discourses may focus more on dreams than the previous, but it's hard to see any actual preparation for what they call soul travel in the lives of the vast majority of people who didn't quit thus far. The idea here that all life is spiritually relevant can apply for those who think life, or part of life, is merely mental, emotional, and physical. Harold Klemp was disturbed by a dream the night before his second initiation. Why are so many of these things listed as if they're names or abbreviations? Harold Klemp dreamt of being among a wild dance after a wedding. He was raised to think this was sacrilege and that weddings were calm and more formal. He discussed the dream with Paul Twitchell. Paul Twitchell interpreted like a marriage to Eck. Harold Klemp took a while to accept it because his mind still wanted to be orthodox or correctly believing. It took him a while to break that inclination. Is Harold Klemp's later interpretation of all wedding dreams really being about initiations or a soul becoming closer to God, the Holy Spirit? Gabriel is the Holy Spirit throughout the Old Testament and in much of the New Testament. The Shekinah, Sakina, are angels or even one metaphysical being. Some people have spoken of Ek initiations like spiritual possessions or gaining a spiritual familiar, particularly the second and fifth. Do Ek initiations really bring ecstatic joy in themselves? I notice no difference with my first, and I have no idea which one the fellow Ekist would consider it. Do Ek initiations bring anyone closer to God? The fact is laid clear in the mention on the next page that the love that changes a person is bonding with the Mahanta, the living leader of Eckankar. Is this bonding metaphysical, or is it just a psychological projection upon the situation of a program of loving and worshiping the living Eckmaster and other Eckmasters? I am skipping the worship of Eckmaster's part because I only consider God to be Yazdan, or worship-worthy, as the Avestan-speaking people would have said. Harold Klemp wanted to hold on to some of his church upbringing and schooling while being in Eckankar. How are the Christian baptisms any less alive than Eckankar rituals? Some of my thought forms and processes must be valuable. Would you want a Mahanta breaking up all the foundations of your thoughts if he could? A true spiritual study should not be abandoned. If Eckankar was true, why would he recommend a vacation from spiritual learning that may only be a minute or two a day? True spiritual exercises should not be abandoned for a while. Some things can be switched, obviously. If the spiritual exercises of Eck, I just don't mean the book, are to strengthen spiritual ability and bring us in tune with God, why would it be good to strengthen spiritual ability and bring us in tune with God? Oh, sorry, read that. Why wouldn't it be good to strengthen spiritual ability and bring us in tune with God? Why wouldn't it be good to... why would it be good to... Okay, there's similar sentences. That's why I keep messing up. Why would it be good to risk spiritual atrophy? I can't help but feel like it is to ignore or forget the questions we may have that cause conflicts with family accepting Eckankar. Eckists are told to accept the living Eckmaster as a dream master who will give them a true assessment of themselves. I don't know if anyone who hasn't gotten a letter from Harold Klemp or received other direct contact from the living Eckmaster can really assert that he even knows they exist in a convincing way, much less knows them well enough to analyze their situation. Shouldn't people take accountability for their self-assessments rather than project them upon a worldly master? The Eck Dream One Discourses by Harold Klemp tells of an Eckist's morning dream of applying for a job. It doesn't seem he was looking for a job in real life. In the dream, he was upset to be told that his qualifications would probably result in him landing a job as a custodian. The dreamer asserted that he was more qualified than the one behind the counter because he was greedy. Words didn't work in getting what he wanted, and he controlled the man with violence. He talked to one of his personalities who asked him, "Is this the behavior fitting of someone in your spiritual station?" People should live up to their degrees, whether that be of knowledge or acknowledged positions in society. The dreamer then prayed to Harold Klemp and was told the dream was about humility. That may be so, but how do we know that the voices and spectral figures that so-called Eckists see are not actually projections upon factions of their own personalities? It may be true that one can't become fully spiritual all at once, but what do they mean by become entirely the Eck? Pages 176 to 177 tells of a woman sitting on the floor of a golden wisdom temple in an entryway by a hallway, eating chicken. Harold Klemp showed up, and people wanted to shake his hand. In real life, the living Eckmaster never allows physical contact between himself and the common members of Eckankar. A younger woman smugly approached. Wazi, as he is called, responded to her smiles with a scowl, and she was cast out. The dreamer dreamt of being worried about her physical condition as Harold Klemp approached. The secret doctrine, or Wazi, shook the greasy hand of the woman seated on the floor. She woke up, elated with a feeling of approval by her Mahanta. Arrogance may be more of a problem than outer unseemliness, but good manners matter too. Now, as a side note, in real life, there's serious physical and psychological consequences if Harold Klemp consumes antibiotic meat, dairy, or the bleached food, white bread in particular. I'm sure it's other bleached food, but So you think he'd never do it on purpose. He has admitted he has knowingly repeated these things before. But anyways. Pages 177 and 178 tell of the story of someone standing by Harold Klemp as a giant rocket landed nearby. She started to run away, but he called her back, and the rocket didn't bring disaster. Is this dream about wanting to flee the spiritual dangers of invoking the presence of an Eckmaster in your imagination, or about her outer problems turning out okay? If she would only face them, can we really have ever richer experience in the worlds of Eck just because we intend to have them? Firm desire can result in wish fulfillment dreams and experiences. It may be true that we only encounter what we are capable of being spiritually ready for. What is our faith? And that makes us humble. What is in our faith that makes us humble? What type of love does it nurture? How is that used? The true dream goes beyond mere symbolism. Isn't it important to have a satisfied mind? Eckankar teaches that the longest time is the approach to death. Wouldn't death be quickened or easier upon the correctly believing and correctly acting Orthodox and Orthoprax? An Ekist's dying father allegedly started to have experience after reading from an Eckankar book. Why read? Why would reading Eckankar books or do Eckankar practices if they are not much for nurturing good thoughts and good practices? The Ek Dream 1 Discourses by Harold Klemp, page 179, tells us the only purpose is to have an active relationship with light and sound that is supposed to be direct manifestation of God. Someone's Baptist father decided to write, whomever was the living Eckmaster, about a dream he had. After a visit of a being he called an angel, the man lost the fear of dying. Would it be more or less frightening? Would it be more or less fitting to interpret the one who assured him his entry into the highest worlds upon death was not an angel, but an adept of the Vairagi detached order? No, an adept of the Vairagi order. The Ekist father thought it was a waking vision. This is what it means by an experience that moves aside and makes way for sight and sound to directly be a part of our consciousness. It seems Harold Klemp means to say that one can become something without experiences or learning to provoke it. The Ek Dream 1 Discourses seem to have a new definition to Ek as something that feels like electricity. Feel a lot of Ek in the graveyard, huh? I don't know if you see any of my graveyard videos, but anyways. Perhaps he means the tingling sensations for relaxation. This is why not smoking, taking other recreational drugs, or even medicine that is not needed for survival healing in particular, is an important aspect of both Islam and Eckankar. One's spirituality is not to be felt in both feelings. One's spirituality is to be felt in both feelings and emotions. Drugs can only lessen the overall capability of the experience of a religious life. Some have problems with such claims of exclusivity as Eckankar does for the feelings of presence claimed for initiates. Eckankar teaches that unusual feelings of warmth and such are secondary to sights, sounds, and love. It would be fair to say that our spirit increases its connection to matters of God as we become enlightened. Can't one be just as pure without the psychedelic visions and even metaphysical visions? Does one have to see Holy Scriptures or encounter it in a vision to become as a living word by manifesting it in situations beyond the book in stone? Even this discourse says people in such peak experiences may neither see or hear such words. There may be actual transcendent experiences to be had, but the words inspired or revealed among them are not incoherent. If it is God's guidance to you and those who take heed, or is the diagnosed, disorganized schizophrenic who is the Mahanta, the living Eckmaster, or of Eckankar, right about write about these individual messages available to each that may be beyond expressing here. One of the highest initiates, not one of the silent nine, as they would call them, but an eighth initiate is his long-time psychologist since, I think, in California, even when he first got the role. If he, maybe I should go into the letters at some point. The application of teachings may be specific to a situation or type of person. How is progressing automatic as one spends time involved in the secret workings of Eckankar? It seems to me that the higher initiates of Eckankar became less advanced in spirituality as time went by. The law of silence, or Kemet, prevents people speaking of this void where all fears are faced. It seems that this excess love and worship of the Mahanta and the alleged Eckmasters has been used by many, and love and worship of the Mahanta and has been used in Eckankar to get through things, but I see no reason to think anyone has become fearless and regularly into truly metaphysical places of indefinable joys. The Ek Dream 1 Discourses by Harold Klemp makes clear on page 180 that people may not have an easier or more enjoyable life by studying dreams. It speaks of people thinking they have been forsaken by the Mahanta, like the Mahanta ever knew of most Ekkas as more than the number or figures in reports at the Eckankar Corporation board meetings. Wouldn't God know doubts better than than the others people treat as their master? A high initiate. They try to minimize those who have a fifth initiation before being members of Eckankar 20 years. Almost everybody's been member 20 years, supposedly. Sounds like a lot of people when they're 17 years. One guy got it at 10 years that I met. But that was a very special situation. Anyways. With doubts about a high initiate with doubts about Eckankar saw in a contemplation that she was on a peak out somewhere in the dark. She thought that not even God could help her. And this person was panic-stricken. She affirmed that this wouldn't become one of these stories where one of the 973 Eckmasters shows up to save the day. She decided to move out on her own. After the dream, she wasn't fearless, but her abrogation faded as she pushed herself to play a clerical part in Eckankar. At some point, she asserted that she had no beliefs. That is when she heard a voice tell her, "Welcome, now we can begin." Page 181 describes the ideas that Eckankar programs gave her about God, the living Eckmaster, truth, and other things were illusions. How can we trust a system that will teach us extremism, sophism, and fanaticism till we no longer take its teachings seriously? The woman lived her life knowing that she would always be in some degree of confusion unless she would gain some sort of God realization beyond the spiritual foundation. Islam would teach a simple and profound monotheism to build one's foundation upon. God consciousness, for example, is those who are God conscious are invited to believe in the Quran, as it says on on the second page of the Quran. Do we start with understanding about God's oneness or transcendence, and then build a religious life around that principle, or build up a spiritual foundation that is full of baseless speculations and illusions till we finally figure out the truth? Alphabet game with an emphasis on ECK. The ECK Dream 1 Discourses by Harold Klemp has the spiritual exercise for the 20th month in Eckankar on page 181. It is to quietly sing words in an alphabetical order before going to sleep. There should be a word with relevance to Eckankar for each letter of the alphabet. That's the real challenge, because not even the books give you a full thing, I don't think. I don't think their lexicon has something for every letter. How does thinking upwards, following a pattern, help one into the dream state? Well, words that occur in the books, you do have A through Z, but I think there wasn't an X. And some. How does thinking up words, following a pattern, help one into the dream state if you have trouble falling asleep? I have heard of counting imagined sheep. I never got that. It couldn't be. I'm messing up with my words, I'm sorry. It could be that imagining up anything to focus on besides where the mind wanders can be helpful. Psychological practices with mythological context show more promising effects and long-term results than their atheistic counterparts with equal or lesser efforts. He does say to do this with reverence at a slow pace, and that should entrain one to a more restful state. The words that came to mind on the 7th of the first month of 1436 were Arahata, Barakabashad, Chila, Danda, Ek, Pakiti, Garahira, Hu, Isam, Asam, Jatnaranjan, Kala, Lok, Mana, Namayatan, Omkar, Paramakshar, Gwediti, Ramkar, Sugmad, Tirmer, Abhikata, Wu Wai, Xylophone, Yidari, and Zoas. X actually turns out to be a ecterm, just a plain X. I don't know how you're supposed to pronounce it. Yidari and Zoas. Which of these words do you have any meaning for, and which ones do you know the Eckankar definition for? Between 2:38 and 6:27 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time on Friday the 31st of October 2014, I had the following experience. It was a dark night before a dark peak with a thin haze upon it. A thin blonde woman chopped off from the left side of her hair and carried it up the mountain. She met a full-figured woman in a glowing red dress. The shapely woman